Hi, I'm Dustin Abbott, and I'm here for a special follow-up episode for today. And not long ago, I gave you a review of the new Tamron 28-200mm f2.8-5.6 RXD for Sony full-frame mirrorless, and I made a statement that it may be the best travel lens currently available on the Sony platform. Well, I put that to the test this last week, and I traveled to one of my favorite places, Mont Tremblant, Quebec. And it's a place that I love because it's physically beautiful, lots of beautiful photo opportunities. It's also a great place if you're an active person to go and to visit, and so it really fits me. And this year, because of COVID, my wife and I, for our anniversary, we had planned a trip to Mexico, and that just obviously wasn't happening. So I had to stay within Canada, and so I'm never all that disappointed when I traveled to Mont Tremblant instead. So I decided I would put that to the test, and so as a kit, I did almost all of the heavy lifting with this particular lens, and I probably shot 85% of the shots on the trip with it. I augmented it in a lightweight kit of a 17-28mm f2.8 RXD from Tamron as well, and then the little tiny Samyang 45mm f1.8 autofocus lens for some of those candid moments across a table or walking around where the light was low and I wanted something with a faster maximum aperture. And so, but for the most part, I shot with this lens and shot it in a wide variety of different situations. And so today what I'm going to do is, first of all, I'm going to give you a little bit of feedback as to how it actually worked. And then I'm also going to show you pictures. I'll show you some of the pictures just in general. We'll break down a few of them and just kind of examine how it handled those particular situations. So first of all, a few observations on the handling of the lens during that time. In many situations, I do recognize that 28mm could potentially be a limiting factor. Fortunately, where I wasn't really in a lot of tight spaces. It's a big area, and so I actually appreciated having the zoom capability, even for landscape images, probably more so than what I would have looked for for the 24mm. Now, your mileage may vary, and my mileage is going to vary depending on the circumstance that I'm in, and that's why, of course, I took the 17-28mm to cover a wider if I needed to go for it. And there were a few situations where I used that, but primarily I stuck with this lens. And so I really appreciated the focal range for this kind of travel because it gave me a huge amount of flexibility on how to frame certain shots. Where that comes in really handy is that there are situations where your best framing is going to be making sure that some elements are not in the frame, and zooming in past those elements allows you to keep what you want while eliminating what you don't want. And you say, well, you could crop afterwards and accomplish the same thing. And that is, of course, true, and I was shooting on a high-resolution 42-megapixel Sony A7R Mark III, which gives you a lot of cropping potential. However, I do prefer to frame. These days, because I shoot so much and I'm so busy, I try to, as much as possible, to limit the amount of work I need to do in post-processing. Now, you may have lots of time to give to your photos, and of course, you can do whatever you want. But if I can eliminate any kind of distraction from the background or the foreground, I'm going to do it in camera, and so I don't have to do it in post. And so I really appreciated the focal length. Now, of course, my biggest concern when it came to the lens was the lack of a built-in stabilizer. And of course, I did have the image stabilization of the A7R Mark III in body, but as I've noted, it's not as effective as in-lens stabilization. So I will say this, I was conscious of that, and I remain conscious of that. As a byproduct, I don't allow my shutter speed to drop as low as what I might if I really felt like I had a great backdrop, safety net, and a really strong IS system. So it was limiting in the sense of I was very aware of it when shooting to make sure that I wasn't shooting 200mm shots at 1/80th of a second or lower. At the same time, because I was aware of it, I didn't really have any images that were ruined by motion blur, mostly because I planned for it. That continues to be, I think, the single greatest limiting factor in the lens, but you can eliminate a lot of its vulnerabilities by just being, very intentional in the way that you shoot as when you're using the particular lens. So let's talk about the image quality of what I got there. First of all, this lens continues to blow my mind that it is as good as what it is. I have had no experience in the past that would lead me to believe that a lens with this kind of zoom range, about 7.5 times or a little less zoom range, is going to give me images that I actually am going to be proud of. However, in this case, images were fantastic. And I really put that to test because I actually did professional work on this trip with the lens. I have a working relationship with the resort there, and so I always do some in-kind work for them while I'm on site. And as a byproduct of that, I actually delivered images that the client loves, you know, a high-end client, by the way, from this lens. And so to me, that's about the highest endorsement that I can give them. And so let's break down a few of those images, and then we'll just look at some more to finish this episode out. So let's jump in and take a look at the detail I was able to capture in some of these images. So first of all, let's look at the impressive amount of detail that you can capture on a higher resolution camera. This is 42 megapixels. And so 28 millimeters, we can see that as we look to a pixel level throughout this, you know, big image here, obviously a lot is in frame, but we can see that everywhere that we look, we've got really very nice acuity and detail, good contrast with basically no post-processing hardly here. You can see, you know, obviously you have some layers of haze when you're looking at a scene this size, but I mean, we can look in to throughout this image and see nice detail wherever we look. So to be able to get that obviously on a travel lens like this, a super zoom like this, is really impressive. And now for a very different kind of image. Now in this case, I saw a beautiful crabapple tree that was just loaded with fruit, and which was nice and red, and it had just been raining, so everything was beautiful, but because there was so much of it, it was a very busy environment. And so I wanted to be able to highlight this, you know, and set a scene. So this obviously is not the best lens in the world for doing this kind of work. However, first of all, Autofocus did a great job of nailing what I wanted to be in focus, so great detail on there. And then the bokeh, while I don't think that this is the greatest strength of the lens, it is certainly acceptable, and so the end result is very nice. And, you know, again, a cut above because of the nice detail above what you're typically going to see with any kind of super zoom type lens. So again, versatility for it. Now I mentioned, you know, professional work. Part of my brief was to, we went out golfing, was to get some images to help to show off one of the golf courses in the resort area. And so anyway, you can see once again, great detail captured. I mean, 42 megapixels worth of information. I mean, this is enough detail for any kind of client, I think for pretty much any kind of print application. And that's, again, really impressive to get with a lens that has this kind of versatility and small form factor. Here again, just looking at it more from the perspective of traveling and wanting to capture landscapes where you are, you know, you can get basically at any kind of selected focal length, you can get really nice detailed images, very good color, and I think that's shown off even better here where I had amazing color to work with at a sunset scene. But I mean, once again, as I kind of alluded to already, there was people in the foreground. There was, you know, because of the COVID stuff, there's areas that are kind of fenced off and lines. I wanted to eliminate a lot of that, but I thought I would keep a few of these just to give some visual kind of geometry to the foreground. And so actually I really like the end result, and I was able to get that by basically zooming in to eliminate a lot of foreground distractions, to compress the scene a little bit, and so you can bring these distant rolling hills a little bit closer. And so again, I mean, incredibly useful, and even in, you know, lower lighting conditions like this, the detail in the image is really beautiful, and I mean, there's just nothing to complain about there. So as you can see, you know, impressive stuff really. To render that amount of detail on a high resolution body, it continues to be incredibly impressive to me. So we're going to end up here by taking a look at just some of the variety of the photos that I took with this lens in particular, and so that you can see them for yourself. Let's jump in. So hopefully you were as happy with those photos as what I was. I came home continuing to be very impressed, and of course the flexibility of having this lens on hand, having the ability to quickly take shots in varying lighting conditions, not being afraid to go to a wider maximum aperture, not being afraid to zoom in and be afraid that if I go into the telephoto in, for example, that I lose image quality. It's really a fantastic travel companion, not to mention that I hiked down the mountain with it clipped, onto my, like a Capture Pro from a Peak Design. I had it clipped, and so it was just there ready to take shots as I hiked, and it's so lightweight and relatively compact that it just wasn't a factor. So I stand by my original prediction after my review. I do think that this is the best travel option that's available on Sony platform right now. So if you haven't already, check it out. I'm Dustin Abbott. If you look in the description down below, I do have linkage to my original review cycle of this particular lens. There's buying links for it there. Also, I do have an image gallery. If you want to look at some of these photos with more detail, go ahead and check it out. And of course, beyond that, there are the typical links to follow me on social media, to become a patron, or to sign up for my newsletter. And if you haven't already, please click that subscribe button right here on YouTube. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.